Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me get the cats herded here. Yeah, Hank, you've got that one. Charlie, you got that one. Huggy's going to be last, and we got Mark over there. Welcome to Warbirds in Review. I'm back. I was here yesterday morning, and I'm going to be here some more. But thanks so much for being here. And I'm going to quickly introduce our panel here. And then we're going to get into the A-37 that is the topic of our program today. And first and foremost, and please don't get up, this is, you look out here and you see history, heroes, and heritage. Well, let's just take the middle one right there. And the first guy I'm going to introduce is this gentleman to my left here. And his name is Hank Hoffman. He's the guy you just saw up there. And this is our guest of honor, and this is our hero right here. Hank, thanks so much for being here. It is indeed an honor for me to be able to moderate this kind of a program with a guy like you here, because this is what this program is designed for. Next in line, we got Charlie Largay. He is the owner of this beautiful airplane over here. And then Mark Peterson. He doesn't own this one. He owns another one, but flies this one, I want to say, on a regular basis. In fact, some of the shots up there that we saw today was that guy right there. And then the last guy, we got John Huggy Huggins, and he'll do a little, he flies it also, and he'll do a little history acquisition talk about it. And he's got an interesting history also. I found it interesting. This airplane is called the Dragonfly, right? And you flew another Dragon, as I remember. Yeah, the Dragon Lady. And if you don't know what a Dragon Lady is, it's a U-2. So he's a U-2 pilot also. So we have a rather distinguished panel here today. And I'm going to start out, before we get to our hero, I'm going to start with Charlie first and just say, okay, yes, you own the airplane. How did that all happen? Where did it come from? And just a brief synopsis of how you got into this.
Okay. Thank you. It's kind of unusual. Been an aviation enthusiast my whole life, been flying since I was real young. Had the opportunity in a parts search for another aircraft to come up with a salvager who had recovered the aircraft from Da Nang after, in 1995, Bill Clinton normalized relations with Vietnam and allowed anything that we had left behind to belong to the government over there. That allowed this airplane, which had been just abandoned, to be sold by the private salvager. I kind of found it just by accident, so 2 weeks later, I was in Sydney and purchased this and a bunch of other parts and airplanes. So brought it back to the United States, which is quite an endeavor in itself. Spent 20 plus years restoring it, totally unprepared for the project I was about to begin, but it was well worth it because I knew I had a very rare relic and an incredibly capable aircraft, and it's turned out to be a whole lot more than I thought it was going to be capability-wise. And the guys who are going to explain how this airplane flies are these two guys, Mark, Huggy. But this is the guy that taught the Air Force how to fly the airplane. And I'm talking about in Vietnam, he was sent over basically with a squadron and in very short notice, take the airplane over there and see what you can do with it, because this is a test flight for a test run with just a limited amount of airplanes and people. And you're going to get 12 months to prove the airplane. And they did things with this airplane that everybody wished they could do today, accuracy. It was, and they flew it day in, day out, and they were incredibly successful. I've just enjoyed building it, and now it's flying after so many years, and we're getting to share an airplane that's awfully rare.
And it's close to 100% right now, too, isn't it? In terms of structure, performance, et cetera.
I left the airplane exactly the way it came out of Vietnam, except for a small piece of glass on the in the cockpit instruments. Everything else there as it came out of Vietnam, the instrumentation, the armament, the pylons, the gun, the minigun in front. They tried to keep it, including the mistakes that they had made in Vietnam after they repainted over there for some repairs. Obviously, it's got bullet holes and dings and dents all over it. So I wanted to show what the airplane looked like. It's got 2,200 hours of combat time. And Mark and Huggy can explain what the history is of the aircraft after I got it and we got it flying.
Yeah, and I'll turn it over to Huggy now and talk to us about the restoration. Okay, he brought it back from Australia. And then it's like, okay, here it is. What do we do next?
Yeah, let me cover a couple things on that, too. 2,200 hours of combat time, as he said, flying over there. The aircraft, if you look at the tail number, it says 68 dash. That's the year the aircraft is contracted. If you look at any Air Force tails, the aircraft built by Cessna, completed in 69, delivered to the Vietnamese in 69. 2,200 combat hours over the course of about 6 years. So let's go to 1975. Early 1975, the communists are flowing south and they're overrunning Vietnam. They overran all the bases down there in April of 89, and they captured 95 of these Dragonflies. They grabbed those aircraft, and in particular, this aircraft was one of the aircraft that the communist North Vietnamese got a hold of. That was April 29th when they got this aircraft, right before Saigon fell. 3 days later, May 2nd, May 3rd time frame, the North Vietnamese were already flying this aircraft in combat against the South. Now, we've seen in the U.S. military where the MiG-25 that Belenko brought over, early MiGs that we captured or got a hold of when people defected. We've had those aircraft, but think of another time when not only was an aircraft captured, but then used in the fight against the enemy. Very, very rare circumstance. So how do we know this? Well, Charlie actually has pictures of 87921 in North Vietnamese communist hands with the crews, with the crew chiefs. So you can see distinctly in the background, they've painted over the South Vietnamese squadron, but they've left the tail number on there. So very, very well documented on that history. So then the communists have the aircraft, and they're going to fly the aircraft. And they flew it for about a total of 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. But of course, they're not getting parts or support from the United States government, and eventually they ran out of the ability to fly the aircraft in any kind of meaningful way. At that point, what do? Well, you push it off the side of the airfield in the grass. Fast forward a few years, an Australian businessman became aware of these aircraft, and long story short, he worked a deal with the Vietnamese government and bought, it depends who you talk to, between 10 and 12 of these aircraft. The aircraft were crated up, floated down the Mekong River to a container ship, and taken over to Australia, where they were parked for many, many years. Now, as an American citizen, as Charlie alluded to, you can't just go buy these aircraft. These are built by Cessna. They're government war machines, and the U.S. government doesn't allow you to do that. But with the normalization of relations by the Clinton administration in 1995, they renounced any ownership of any U.S. equipment, and in rolls Charlie Largay with another very good story he can maybe tell you about getting this aircraft in 1999, and thus began his restoration. Now, keep in mind, we see some beautiful aircraft at Warbirds in Review. They've been put together by these great organizations, fighter rebuilders. There's dozens of them, and they have a great staff. Charlie's great staff is, you're looking at him right here. He did all of the work himself. Very, very good businessman, but extremely talented with tools and manufacturing by himself. So one piece at a time, he would take parts that have been sitting in Vietnam, and keep in mind, for many years, high humidity environment, you can imagine what that's going to do to the aircraft. He'll pull a hydraulic actuator out and then start rebuilding it. He'll remanufacture it if he has to. There's a lot of restoration involved, but probably more than restoration. He had to remanufacture the parts on his own in his machine shop. So quite the amazing story over 20 years. And when you're doing that kind of restoration, it's obviously a lot of blood and sweat and tears and busted knuckles and a lot of blood. And we may even see up on the screen if they can show the picture up there. The aircraft is. There was our first public display of the aircraft. We brought it around there, and nobody knows the aircraft better than Charlie. He didn't know I sandbagged him on this one. But when you're on your cell phone, you walk around the back of the aircraft, you take a look with your head down. That's right about here. So Charlie went around the back of the aircraft and caught it. So we had a little bit of fun with Charlie bleeding all over the ramp. So Sorry, Charlie.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. I didn't know you were doing that one.
Oh, man. So that's really the overall background of the aircraft. But before I turn it over, I do want to say, the aircraft is like he said. He didn't build it to be a show aircraft. He built it to be an aircraft that all of you could come out there and see what a piece of history looked like Colonel Hoffman, what he did, what it looked like when he flew it. And it's so authentic. And actually, on that note, for the authenticity of this, I want to thank the reenactors that were out here earlier. They add such a big element to just the feel and the uniqueness of this whole experience. So thank you to them.
And so what you're saying is Hank could right now jump in that thing, and if we weren't careful, you'd hear it start to crank up, and away he'd go.
Away he goes.
Okay.
He could do it.
All right, with that, I'm going to turn this over to our hero here, and I am honored. I am absolutely honored, Hank, to bring you to this crowd. We are fellow Academy graduates, I am very proud to say. Fellow American Airlines pilots, also proud to say, both retired. And like I said, two Distinguished Flying Crosses, 19 Air Medals. He flew this thing for real. 3 sorties a day, maybe even more. I'm not sure. No, 3. Okay. And so, Colonel, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell a few stories.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
I was going to start with why and then go to how on this airplane. The movie kind of took the wind out of my sails on why. The reason was we were running out of close air support. The A-1 was old and being retired, and we needed a replacement. We needed it right now. What we really needed was the A-10. We didn't have money for that. We had money to, if you take an existing airplane, a T-37, and you modify it, you don't have to test it as much. That makes it cheaper. You have existing things with the manufacturer where they can slap it back together. That makes it cheaper. These things, the Air Force paid $161,000 each for them in the 60s. That's about what you pay for a Maverick missile right now, and you can reuse these. It's a pretty good deal. On the other hand, you have to put some effort into putting the bomb where you want it to go. So that kind of leads us into why. The competitor for close air support in this airplane was the F-100. We had, when I first got to Vietnam, we had 3 F-100 squadrons and 1 squadron of A-37s. And when I left, it was reversed. There was 3 squadrons of A-37s and 1 F-100s because we were running out of F-100s too. The difference in the F-100 and the A-37 was this airplane and the other one carried almost exactly the same armament. This guy could carry a little more if you put your mind to it. But this was a third the size of the F-100. And when I went by the squadron and checked the records, this guy was also taking a third the number of hits that the F-100 was per aircraft. So it was hard to hit. It's a little tiny airplane. That was a good deal if you were flying them. By the way, please don't call me a hero. I didn't do anything heroic. I just did what I was told to do. And lots of people feel like that, and I meant to start with that objection, and I forgot about it. Okay, so we're going to why. Anything supersonic has a cornering speed over 400 knots. This one, fully loaded, has a cornering speed of 320 knots. What does that do? Cornering speed is the tightest turn you can make. If you are bombing the ground, the trick with it is to get close to your target so that you can hit it, and not so close that you run into the ground afterward. Having a low cornering speed like this one does means that you could get lower and not kill yourself. That's a really good deal. So the F4, for example, I know for sure its cornering speed was 420 knots. This one is 320 knots. The F4 was doing its close air support. They were dropping from 6,000 feet. That meant if you were doing a 30-degree dive, that your target over here was 2 miles away from you. They could barely see the damn target, much less hit it. And the F-4 was known for spraying bombs all over Vietnam. We were dropping from 1,500 feet.
All right. The bottom line, though, is how close, how accurate were you? Okay? How close could you put that bomb to that target down there?
Well, since I was only a half a mile away from the target as opposed to 2 miles, I left Vietnam, I think, with a 5-meter average, 15 feet away from where I wanted it. That was a pretty good deal. I can recall putting it in a cave mouth because they needed it in a cave mouth. I can recall hitting the front windshield of a truck. And I apologized to the forward air controller afterward. I should have hit short and rolled the napalm up under the truck. But I'm pretty sure they couldn't use it afterward anyway.
But the only weapon system that you were using, you had a depressible pipper, and that was it, right? I mean, there's, the modern day weapons out there, or airplanes out there now, have a weapon system where we, like in the F-16 when we flew it, we had the CCIP, continuously computed impact point. Here you got a pipper that you depressed and then said, okay, here's my dive angle, here's my airspeed, and away you went.
That's it. That's what we had for a gun sight. It worked pretty well. Actually, with the napalm, what I found was if you got close enough to where the target filled the sight, you couldn't miss it. But you weren't going to go very far over it either. You could only do that with napalm. We also carried cluster bombs. They don't use napalm anymore. Apparently, it hurts people. And we only want to blow them up. We don't want to hurt them. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I'm not Secretary of Defense either. So we carried napalm. We carried cluster bombs. Cluster bomb was a bunch of hand grenade-sized bombs, and you pushed them out to the back of the tube here, and they would arm by spinning. And if they spun fast enough, they were armed. And when they hit something, they would blow up. In some cases, they had a timer on it. They were nasty, and we didn't like to hurt people. We just wanted to kill them.
How about the gun? Did you use the gun much?
The minigun here, 7.62 revolving barrels. Was not very effective. It was fun to use. It was a little bit like using a hose. When you got close to it, you could put it exactly where you wanted it, and I mean exactly. But it was not very effective. This is the caliber weapon they were using on the president the other day, 7.62, and. In the jungle, if there was a branch there, a branch would deflect the thing. Whereas if you had a nice 50 caliber in here, it would push the branch out of the way and do the job. Wasn't very effective. Loved it. Wasn't very effective. Let's see, while I'm here, so we got to get close to the target to bomb. While I'm here, I'm going to talk about the airplane a little bit. Tip tanks are added to the basic T-37. The basic T-37 had 650 pounds of fuel in the wing, almost 600 pounds in the center tank, and 600 in the other wing. So what's that? 1,800 pounds of gas is all you got in the 6,000-pound T-37. These things here, one on each side, have almost 600 pounds that you add, and these things will add almost 600 pounds. You'll see the wing stations here. The more things you can add under your wing, the more deadly you are. So we had more stations than the F-100 did, for example. So we could do a little more damage. They were graded by gross weight. The one on the outside would hold a 250-pound store. This one would hold a 500-pound store, and these two were good for 750 pounds. Who knows how much a 750-pound bomb weighs? The answer is 831 pounds.
Okay.
That's with the fuse and the fin and all that stuff. And so they weren't real particular about sticking to the numbers on that. But
Talking about fuel, though, you said you carried fuel,
Yeah.
and you told us how much. Didn't you have another fuel technique to save gas also when you were up at altitude?
we could shut down an engine.
They'd fly around with one engine shut down, and that was normal, right? You said
Well,
you were supposed to make it go straight, you step on the rudder, but even if you didn't, it was okay.
Well, if the forward air controller needed us to hold, we could hold for quite some time. Longest mission I flew over there was 2.7 hours, which is a long time on whatever the hell amount of gas this is. But if it was fun when you shut one down, it didn't have enough rudder trim authority to straighten it out, and you could push on the rudder for an hour. We would switch them every half hour. You would keep the other engine warm and switch back, and you could lean on one rudder and then lean on the other rudder, or you could do it like I did and not worry about it and just go through the air sideways. We were still saving gas. We weren't worrying about where we were going.
Yep. Okay. I just wanted to bring that up. Go ahead.
All right. Well, going back around the walk around here, these things here by the under the engine, that's an engine inlet screen, and when the engines are running on the ground, this beauty snaps up in front of it because the thing acts like a vacuum cleaner, and it will pick up everything on the ramp and run it through the engine. Because it's so powerful and so low. The T-37 didn't need that because the engines were crap. All right. When I went through ground school, you notice that this is, and you get into this thing by putting your foot in here and just mounting up. When I went through ground school, they told me that this is the only fighter in the world that you can stand on the ramp and piss into the cockpit. I don't think I can do it at my age, and I never did it anyway because I love the airplane. This airplane has no pressurization system. it's nice to have an electric system, but the engines will run just fine without it. You don't need the hydraulic system because you can put the gear down without it, and you don't need the flaps. All I needed to get home was one engine, and if I could hit high key, I didn't need one engine.
What kind of ceiling did it have? You know, unpressurized. How high do you ever have this thing?
Well, I don't think I had it over 35,000 feet, but the pressurization limit, you know, you're not supposed to go over 25,000. But if you were coming home and you were short of gas, you shut an engine down and you go up. These engines are most efficient at 100%. And so if you shut one down, put the other one at 100%, see how high it'll go, you're getting best range operation out of it.
Understand. How about best sortie, worst sortie? What was your most memorable sortie in this airplane?
Most memorable, well, I suppose I should tell the one about where I almost killed myself.
Good start.
So I was holding with an engine shut down, and they had our target that day was a bunch of boats on the Mekong, and the forward air controller had us hold because the boats, and I saw them, they went to the shore where there was extensive tree cover, and we couldn't see them. And he said, "Can you hold?" And I said, "Yes." And I had shut one down and shut the second one down, so I'd shut one down for about a half an hour, and they decided that they'd waited long enough, and they came back out on the Mekong. My forward air controller was also running out of gas, and he says, "You see the target?" And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "Well, I'm going to mark it as far away as I can, but I'm required to mark it." And he pulled the nose up and shot that rocket off into God knows where. And he says, you see the boats on the river 1.5 miles east of my mark?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I still see them." And he says, "That's your target." And so I'm getting ready to roll in, and I'm up at 12,000 feet, which is real high. They can't see us, don't know we're coming. But I got to restart the other engine. I figured it was good to go into combat with both engines running. And I'm starting the engine. He says, can you strafe with bombs on board?" And I didn't know the answer to that question, and my wingman didn't know either. And so we gave him the old salute and said, "Well, we'll give it a try. We've never done it, but we'll give it a try." And what that meant was, of course, that I just gave you the lecture on maneuvering speed. We should have been at 320 knots maneuvering speed instead of the 300 knots that we normally strafed at. And I went in at 300 knots because I was dumbass pilot, and 300 knots is what we strafed at. So I'm doing 300 knots, and I'm throwing switches with both hands because I got to clean up the don't bomb and the do strafe business. And I get there, and I get the first boat in line. I get the sight on him, and I squeeze the trigger, and nothing happens because I haven't done the master arm switch, which is located right here. And so I reached up, slapped on the master arm switch, and did what you're not supposed to do. I should have gone off dry, and young and invincible. I pulled up to the last target, and I put a burst in him, and I pulled back on that stick, and the airplane smartly changed, and I put the power up, and it kept going down. And I recall there was a mast on that boat, and I said, "Oh shit, I'm going to hit the mast," and I didn't. It went by on the right-hand side. I said, "Oh good, I'm safe now," but I noticed I was still going down. And the mast wasn't very high. It could have been 25 feet above the water, maybe. But here's another lesson in aerodynamics for you. You get in effect at half the wingspan. The wingspan on this airplane is 32 feet. So along about 16 feet, I got a little extra lift out of the thing. And I figure I didn't have anybody watching at the time, but I think it went low enough to where it gave you a rooster tail, like you see from the power boats. Anyway, it scared the bejesus out of me, but I was still flying, so we went back to work and strafed, and then we did the napalm and the CPU on the boats in the shoreline because they ran for the shore again. My forward air controller, I never saw him again. He said he was running out of gas. I think he just left and said, "Cleared hot," and that was about it.
That was your worst.
Well, that was the worst.
Your scariest, if you will.
But the typical mission, we didn't really know where we were going. What we would do, they'd call you off alert, and then about 2 minutes later, I'm sitting in this thing with the engines running, and you get the orders from the command post. Talk to Rustic 1-8. He's at 320 degrees and 85 miles, and he'll be on frequency 323.5. And so I write all that down, and off we go, get armed, take off, point it in 320 degrees. When we get close, we try to talk to Rustic, and we get Rustic on the radio. Start down about 25 miles away from his location. Then we got to see him. And the good news is he's in a camouflage airplane like this, but the top of his wing is painted white. So if you see this little white finger moving around down there, that's him. And
was he an 01, 02?
Rustic was OV10? OV10.
Okay.
And
do you fly as a two-ship most of the time, or did you do a lot of single ships work?
No, two-ship all the time. The idea is to have somebody around in case you go down, they'll know where you are. Because the other guy becomes the rescue controller. And he takes over and says, comes up on guard and gets some help.
Okay. I was going to ask Mark, some of the photos you saw, I'll give you a break for a minute here, okay? And we'll talk to Mark a little bit about flying the airplane. Like I said, in the video that you saw there, he did some of that work, and hey, fill us in on how you think this airplane flies. He flew it in combat, obviously, and talked about corner velocities and stuff like that. What's your opinion of this jet?
Well, it's a wonderful little airplane. Handling is extremely good. One thing you got to keep in mind, for me, I fly the airplane at about, in air show performance, is about 7,000 or 8,000 pounds. Hank was flying it at 14,000 pounds. So they're really, really different airplanes. Yeah. But for me, the thrust to weight is just spectacular. I mean, at air show weights, as Charlie pointed out, thrust to weight on this gets close to 1. And so the vertical performance is just astounding. Hank talked about the low corner speed, and that gives me a very, very tight turning radius. The handling, the roll control is very good, although it's a little different because it uses a combination of both spoilers and ailerons. And so first half of the stick deflection, you get ailerons only, and you get adverse yaw. And you continue into the stick deflection, you get spoilers coming up, now you get pro yaw. So as you're moving the stick around, your nose will go both directions. So, and there's no yaw damper in the airplane. So my tail wheel training, not working? Okay, sorry. My tail wheel training comes in handy because your feet are very, very active in the airplane. It is very, very important to keep the nose on line. Other than that, it handles a lot like a Cessna 414, only extremely well powered. One of the things I wanted to add to Hank's presentation just briefly is that Charlie pointed out, the airplane has a lot of redundant control capabilities as well.
So it's even though it's not as battle hardened as the A-10, the airplane could take a little bit of damage and still bring guys home. So neat little airplane in a lot of ways. But for me, just flying in an air show environment, it's crisp handling, excellent vertical performance, great turning, and you never have to worry about energy. Get a little low on energy, you just push the fun levers a little further forward and it goes faster. Best example of that, my corner velocity at air show weights is about 240 knots, not the 320 that Hank was using at those weights. But I can do a min radius turn at about 4.5 Gs and come out of that at 240 knots, push the throttles up, go straight into the vertical. I don't have to worry about building energy, and I don't need an afterburner to do it. So great flying airplane for air shows.
How about, you were talking about G limits. How about G limits in combat? Was that ever a factor? What's the G limit on the airplane?
Well, it's 6 Gs, but if you're asymmetrical load, if you drop the one bomb off the wing, it was supposed to be 4.5. I never paid any attention to that. If I got close to the ground, I pulled as hard as I could.
Makes sense.
And I never over-G'd anything.
Okay. I meant to ask, too, did you ever have other airplanes of concern out there, as in MiGs? Was there ever any, I mean, most of the time you worked in the South, correct? And so, MiGs coming out looking for you guys, did that ever happen?
We were always to be in the air-friendly environment. And so I bombed in Laos once, but we didn't meet any enemy air up there.
And how about getting shot at? Were you worried about, surface-to-air missiles or shoulder-mounted or anything like that? Or just guys taking pot shots at you?
Well, we got shot at all the time. Most of it's small arms fire. Small arms fire will only hurt you if you're below 3,000 feet. I didn't spend very much time below 3,000 feet. But if you're doing it like they taught you in school, to line up and do a nice straight run at the target, and the target is shooting at you, what you've done is you have, if the target's not moving, because he's lined up on you, it makes it easier for you to shoot him. It makes it easier for him to shoot me. So I didn't like to do that. I want to get to that point at 1,500 feet and 30 degrees and the proper airspeed, but I don't mind if I pull hard to get there and then pull hard to get away from there. That makes me a moving target throughout the process, except when you're pickling. And it worked very well for me. They never put a hole in me.
That's good. And I think we've got a shot here. I know Scott might be able to find it, of you in an actual bombing pass.
I think you got the gun camera film, the strike camera film.
Okay. And what were they dropping in this shot?
This is napalm.
Okay, it's a napalm shot. And I asked earlier about, the weapons control system, if you will.
There it is.
Okay, and here's the shot.
There's a canister going. See it?
Okay, it's a napalm canister right there.
And the next thing you'll see is some white stuff, which is the smoke from the fax mark, and you'll notice the bomb goes right in there.
Yep.
You'll also notice it's a triple canopy jungle, and I'm not sure the damn napalm actually gets to the ground. And there's another one.
Yep.
That one hits the ground.
And are they typically this size canister of napalm?
Yeah,
about the same size?
maybe a little smaller. We always flew with the tank on the number 2 pylon, and so you would get sometimes you get a 750-pound napalm, but most of them were 500 pounds. And you can put a 500-pound on either side of that load. That
was a typical load?
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of the actual bombing and stuff, did you use the Pipper all the time, or did you get to the point where you could sit there and just look out the window and go, okay, I know that bomb's going to go about there, and
I didn't use the checklist for much. I carried it, but I found that I didn't have time for the damn checklist. If you were scrambled, you wanted to get in the air in a hurry, turned on all the engines, and off you went.
Wait, you were an American Airlines pilot too, right? Okay, just checking. Yeah, we had to do the checklist there.
Well,
a little different.
I don't know. I think, what was it? You turned all the shiny switches on and you left the guarded switches alone and you pushed the throttles up.
There you go.
Okay. Anyway, where were we?
Well, you were talking about, hey, jumping in the airplane and flipping switches and going out there, and I was asking about bombing.
The gun sight. So the only checklist I ever used religiously was the after-action checklist. And the reason I used it was because it was the first time I had to breathe calmly. And you know, you're getting rid of some of that adrenaline. I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, you know, but the adrenaline's going down, and I got the checklist that's after action. The first thing on there is turn off the gun sight. And I would reach up to turn off the gun sight and discover I hadn't turned it on. Yes, you get used to knowing where they're going to go. And I was telling you guys, I can tell you how to drop without a gun sight if you get those parameters I'm talking about, 30 degrees and the right airspeed and the right altitude. 138 mils is what's supposed to go in the gun sight, and 138 mils at arm's length is about that far. So if you can find the velocity vector and put it about that far above what you're trying to hit, you'll hit it. And the other way is, like I said, if you're dropping napalm and the target fills that gun sight, you won't miss it either. Very accurate airplane.
Yep. Technical question: are the seats hot in this airplane? Are they? No, they're not. Okay. I was wondering about that, and so you got to fly with parachutes, so you got parachutes on there. Canopy to get rid of it. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I got about 100 and something hours. This, by the way, this was the standard trainer I trained in. He trained in, and as they said in the tape, for 50 years or so, the T-37 is what we learned how to fly. But to get rid of the canopy, just a lever. Go ahead. Correct.
Just open up the motor, we'll take it up.
Okay. Just open up a little bit, and off it'll go.
And off it goes.
Okay. Good. All right. I'm going to ask these guys if we're getting close to wrap-up time, but things that we've missed now that we'd like to discuss. There's some other stories here. Probably not going to have time. Mark's got a great one about a Vietnamese pilot that, and come to us if we don't have. Well, do you have time now, real quick?
Sure. I was at an air show in Moses Lake about a month ago, and there was a gentleman at the fence who motioned us over. Smaller gentleman, obviously Asian descent, and he started talking to me in broken English about flying this airplane. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. You flew in Vietnam, and his nephew was there and helping to translate a little bit. And he kept saying, yeah, I flew that airplane. And he finally came out, pulled his phone out.
It must be time to wrap up.
What's that?
It must be time to wrap up.
Yeah, exactly. So he pulled his phone out and he started showing me pictures of him in this airplane. It was just amazing. And
this tail number.
This very airframe. And so we, of course, grabbed him, pulled him under the ropes, and along with his family, brought him out to the airplane, put him in the airplane. And he started telling stories, and it seemed like he alternated. Some of the stories were in English, and some of them were in Vietnamese. And so his nephew was sitting there listening to the stories, and his kids were sitting there listening and smiling. I had no idea what he was saying. But we enjoyed just listening to him talk about flying the airplane. We got some great pictures. I've stayed in touch with him. We're going to try to get some more information from him. But amazing story of just how much fun air shows and flying and operating these warbirds can be in terms of they're great to fly, they're fun to do, but the history and the people you get to meet is really the icing on the cake, so to speak.
All right, I'm going to wrap it up here, but I'm going to ask if we got time, I'll say, for 3 questions, maybe 3 questions. Anybody got any questions for the group? We're going to be down here afterwards if you want to come up and personally, hey, look at the airplane, talk to these guys, fine. There's a couple right over there. We got a microphone we can give them.
I have a question.
Oh, okay. All right, hey, no, Connie, sorry. Nope, your mic's off. All right, you're out of here. All right, go ahead. We got a mic down here.
I was just curious if the A-37 uses speed brakes, or did you just have to pay attention how fast you were going?
Speed
on
brakes.
dive?
That's speed brakes. Don't hurt yourself.
Big panel right behind the nose gear.
Comes down behind the nose gear.
It's about that long. The full width of the aircraft comes down at any speed.
Let me take a stab at this question.
The Italians are here. The Italians are here.
If you're worried about how fast you're going, yes, you can slow down, but that doesn't help much. If you go past Mach 0.7, what happens is the tail is blanked out by the wings, and the stick doesn't do anything at all. And that's why it's limited to 0.7 Mach. I have done that. It's a very interesting experience. I don't recommend it.
Okay, if I could, my microphone's working now. If you think of Vietnam, I know you think of General Robin Olds. The man was so respected and such a great leader. His daughter, Christina, is here. And if you have not had the opportunity to read Christina's book, actually it's Robin's book that Christina finished, I highly recommend Fighter Pilot. Christina will be in Warbird merchandise immediately following this presentation to sign the books, and a true tribute to Vietnam and to Robin Olds. Christina will be in merchandise if you have a chance to go over. Okay, sir, back to you.
Ed, we had just one question from the crowd for Colonel Hoffman. Did you fly it single pilot or with the 2 guys?
We were single pilot almost all the time. Every once in a while you had a new guy checking out, or occasionally had people who wanted to take a ride. I recall going with a helicopter pilot. So the way you get into a 30-degree dive is you don't push the nose over 30 degrees. It's kind of uncomfortable. What you do is you turn and you bank to whatever that is, 120, 135 degrees, and then you pull toward the ground. And as a helicopter pilot, he was very uncomfortable with being upside down and pulling toward the ground.
Charlie, go ahead.
One person asked, what's this airplane weigh with all this garbage on it? We're in combat ready. This airplane weighs 6,018 pounds, just like this, no fuel. And the reason it can carry so much armament is because of that big fat wing, and we got 5,800 pounds of thrust. So if you put those together, you're real close to 1. That's why it's so powerful, why it's vertical, why it can turn so quickly.
Okay.
It's not a high-speed aircraft, but it will carry a lot of stuff.
All right, we got another question over here. Here, give me a mic. Oh, he's there. Okay, we're good.
Well, I've got one question. Hank knows the answer to this, but what was the last combat action of the A-37?
Who am I talking to?
Right there.
Oh. I know you. The last combat action, the A-37s were actually the last combat squadron in Vietnam. They were right there. They went home after the treaty. The treaty was signed in 73, beginning of 73. So they went home right after that. But they were the last fighter people there.
Okay, one more question.
Okay, I wonder how bad these things spin with all that garbage hanging on it. I flew them at Graham Air Base in 1958, and they had a wild spin.
Well, we my flight manual says that spin is a prohibited maneuver.
Okay.
Yours probably says the same thing. I don't, unless you were spinning the T-37. It sounded like it was an A-37. Well, we spun the A-37 at test pilot school. It was a way to get the student test pilots into taking data in a spin, which is real interesting. I have heard some of the recordings of the test pilots. They go into the spin, and the only thing you hear is, oh, shit. And they get critiqued. You know, you're supposed to count the number of turns and observe the bank angle and the pitch angle. And oh, shit is not an acceptable description of what's happening.
I got mine into a phase 3 spin, and that ground was just going around like mad. But
Yeah.
I had a very good instructor, and he got it out. Otherwise, I would have been on the ground too.
But it didn't come out all that easily. You had to bang the stick forward, as I recall. We spun this one with an asymmetrical load on it. Put a 500-pound bomb on one wing and spin it, and that was pretty interesting too. But you're not supposed to spin them.
Okay. All right. Finally, we're done. I will ask one more thing that I typically do. I didn't do it yesterday morning in my presentation, but I want to say thank you to the active duty and the veterans in the crowd out here. So, hey, please, active duty, veterans, military service, please rise. We'd like to say thank you. And with that, I'm going to say thank you first to Charlie for buying this aircraft and bringing it to us. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks to Mark for flying it, and he's got another one, and it's close to being totally restored at this point. And Huggy, thank you for your inputs and your flying. I won't call you a hero, okay? Thank you. But I'm going to say, Colonel, thank you for your service, and thanks for being who you are. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.